those time travel volunteers?
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean? Where are you going now? Back to the future?
No. Already been there.
Yeah, I know, I haven't covered these yet. Yeah, I know, but I don't have time to do all 3 films. A top 10 list? Well, I haven't done one in a while, and it would be a good way to review all 3 films in one video. Well, I figure, what the hell? What's up? It's BigJackFilms here, and welcome to another review. And today we're taking a look at one of my favorite films of all time, Back to the motherfucking Future! Yes, arguably the greatest time travel movie in history, Back to the Future is one of the most popular films of the 80s and one of the greatest films of all time. It had 2 sequels, making it also one of the greatest trilogies of all time, a cartoon series that lasted for 3 seasons and also introduced the world to Bill Nye the Science Guy, a vast amount of merchandise including a kick-ass Lego set, a fair amount of video games, both good and god-awful, and even a frickin' ride! It's no doubt that it's more than just a simple series of comedy action movies, but a pop culture phenomenon spanning over 35 years of fans for the time-traveling adventures of Marty McFly and Dr. Emmett Brown. Now, as a huge fan of the series, you might be thinking I'll be reviewing all the films in the trilogy, as well as the spin-offs that have come out in all different forms of media. Well, since I don't really have the time or day to do such, I figured I'd ask this question. As iconic as the franchise is, which moments from the series are truly the best? Yeah, sure, many fans have cited quotes and scenes, but which moments, for a better lack of a pun, stand the test of time? Which is why today, I'll be covering the top 10 greatest moments from the entire series. So grab your trusty hoverboard and set your time circuits, for this is BigJackFilms' Top 10 Timeless Back to the Future Moments. Number 10. Back to the Future: The Ride. As most of you know, I'm a huge fan of Universal Studios, so this attraction had to be on here. However, I will try to keep my review of this short because if you want to see a real in-depth review of this ride, check out Some Jerk with a Camera's 3-part retrospective. But in my opinion, Back to the Future: The Ride was an absolute blast from the past. It takes everything we love from the movies and even adds some stuff that a lot of fans wanted for a possible 4th installment. In fact, you could just call this Back to the Future Part 4, The Ride. Depending on where you want to put it in the timeline post Part 3, the premise is quite simple. As a tourist, you explore Doc Brown's facilities of the Institute of Future Technology, where you would be sent one day into the future. Huh, talk about 24-hour service. But it turns out Biff Tannen, the chief villain of the series, has stowed away from his 1955 timeline and hijacks the DeLorean. With no choice, Doc sends us in an 8-passenger DeLorean to chase Biff through the space-time continuum. The ride was one of the first screen simulators at the parks, which today has been abused to death, but at the time it was pretty impressive to be in a time machine surrounded by an IMAX dome. Steven Spielberg and director Douglas Trumbull did a major impressive job in making you feel like you stepped into the world of Back to the Future. And hey, that's the motto of Universal Studios, riding the movies.
Movie magic. That's what Universal is all about.
And boy did this ride have everything. flying through 2015, dodging avalanches in the Ice Age, flowing through a river of lava in a volcano, and encountering a Godzilla-sized Tyrannosaurus Rex that swallows you whole! Holy crap, that sounds incredible! I mean, I don't see anything replacing something so awesome! In fact, let's go to Universal Studios right now. Come on, guys, let's go ride this thing! Alright, I'm finally in Orlando. Time to go back to the future. What the fuck is this shit? No, this can't be right! Why is the ride not here? Wait a minute! Biff must have altered the timeline after hijacking the DeLorean. He must have persuaded Universal to sell the soundstage to Matt Groening. That son of a bitch! I gotta find a way to fix this. Of course! Okay, I just need to set the time circuits to 2006 and warn Universal not to be persuaded by Biff's offer. Okay, now that the time is fixed up, now it's time to go back to the future. Yeah, as most of you could tell, the ride closed in 2007 to make way for the Simpsons ride, which is essentially Back to the Future, but with the Simpsons skin on it.
Nobody calls me yellow.
I can understand that the technology needed to change and that the 2015 date was looming closer to be outdated, but come on, it's Back to the Future! One of Universal's greatest films ever, and you replace it with the Simpsons? This was a major disappointment for many future fans, but thankfully the ride and its pre-show are available on the DVD Blu-ray copies of the film, so if you want to see the ride in its entirety, go check it out. But overall, while the ride may be gone, it will stand in the minds of Universal guests for all time. Number 9. Doc explains the alternate timeline from Back to the Future Part 2. Arguably one of the biggest what the fuck surprises in cinema history, in which Doc and Marty find themselves in an alternate 1985. Which, come to think of it, actually is the present day, isn't it? Who do I care? Doc and Marty are probably trying to fix this shit as we speak. This scene from Part 2 is probably one of my favorite Doc Brown scenes in the trilogy. Why? Well, for one thing, Christopher Lloyd being able to give out a lot of mumbo-jumbo science babble.
Obviously, the time continuum has been disrupted, creating this new temporal event sequence resulting in this alternate reality.
English, Doc.
But the main reason is because the scene explains really well how in some respects time travel works, especially the consequences when you alter history. As a kid watching these on VHS back in the day, I was always confused and really disturbed on what the hell happened when they returned. So watching Doc explain the entire problem on a chalkboard was actually quite helpful, and really got me to understand how time travel worked at a young age. This scene is so iconic that they ended up spoofing it on Family Guy.
Now, at some point during that evening, you did something that changed the course of your history, causing the timeline to skew off into an alternate tangent, where you're married to Molly Ringwald, Quagmire's married to Lois, and for some reason we have a chalkboard in the living room.
Then again, since Family Guy seems to have the biggest spoof reel of the trilogy, you'd think they would give it the Blue Harvest treatment. But whatever the reason, this scene is one of my favorites in the trilogy. Maybe it's because it explains it better, or maybe it's due to the fascination of time travel, but there's nothing wrong with educating yourself on alternate history.
That's all in the past.
You mean the future?
Whatever.
Number 8. To be continued. Yes, probably another iconic moment from the trilogy as a whole are the 3 cliffhangers that just want you wishing for more. A lot of us know of the first movie's cliffhanger, in which Doc tells Marty to come with him back to the future, But what some might not know is that it was more played as a joke. They had no intention of making a sequel during the first movie. Hell, the first movie was somewhat of a pain in the ass to get off the ground. But since audiences couldn't get the joke and the fact that the first movie was such a massive success, people were always asking about the sequel. So Universal did offer director Robert Zemeckis to make a second film. But instead he decided to make 2 sequels and therefore creating a trilogy. Even when Part 2 was released, nobody knew that Part 3 was shot simultaneously with Part 2. So when the to be concluded title came out, most people's reaction went something like this.
Oh, you've
Got to be.
fucking kidding me! It's right back where we started!
But aside from that, most of the endings are very uplifting. Even in Part 2, when things seem to be in the darkest of times, when Marty gets a letter from Doc, it still holds hope in the viewer. As for Part 3, well, while it is extremely over the top, even for Back to the Future standards,
This time train is just so damn cool.
and of course, each film ends with that classic cliffhanger music. We'll get to that in a moment. Either way, the endings are still uplifting and a lot of fun, and keep you excited for whatever future adventures lie ahead.
Hey, Doc! Where you going now? Back to the future?
No. Already in there.
Number 7. History repeats itself. Surprisingly and somewhat unnoticeably, one of the biggest themes of Back to the Future as a whole is the theory that history repeats itself.
If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, here's an iconic scene from Part 1.
Whoa, kid, stop. I'll get it back to you, all right?
Exciting and iconic. Now here's a scene from Part 2.
Hey! Stop! Look, I need to borrow your hoverboard.
Huh, I get the feeling this just happened. What do you think, Biff?
Something very familiar about all this.
Yeah, I know. Now here's a scene from Part 3.
Are you catching what I'm talking about? These scenes from all 3 films are the same frickin' scene, just in a different timeline. But it doesn't end there. How about the scene when Marty is called a coward by all 3 generations of Biffs? There's also the scenes where Marty explores the timelines, the climaxes of Part 1 and 3, and even the endings are the goddamn same. I'm not nitpicking or bitching about it, but they're really repetitive. But who cares if the scenes are the same? Who cares if Biff was somewhat forced to becoming a threatening villain because they had no other ideas? Who cares if Home Alone 2, Hangover 2, and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets are the same frickin' movie? Or if they find a cure for deja vu?
Not me.
Or if they find a cure for deja vu.
Not me.
They may be a bit repetitive, but they're still awesome. Overall, in this case...
Looks like history's repeating itself.
Never do that again! Number 6. Biff. Just Biff. If there's one character that is as iconic out of the entire trilogy, it's this sleazy bastard. While Doc and Marty are the iconic duo when anybody thinks of Back to the Future, Biff was in some ways for me the most memorable. He's the definitive iconic high school bully that inspired several other classic bully characters in all forms of media. And all of the credit has to go to the actor himself, Thomas F. Wilson. In the first film, he was just a classic cardboard cutout bully that Stephen King could have written in his sleep. But Biff is more of that, and he goes further than what most would write. He's conflicting, he's threatening, he's harassing, hell, he's a friggin' sexual predator.
Well, looky what we have here.
Dude, that's just fucked up. But in some regards, he gets his comeuppance by getting his ass kicked by Crispin Glover and becoming his personal bitch, and in some ways, it's a welcome conclusion to his story. But as the films went on, he got crazier, and crazier,
2 McFlys with the same gun.
and crazier.
It's meant to be! I'm gonna marry you someday, Lorraine! Someday you'll be my wife!
He gets so insanely villainous that it's really over the top. His grandson Griff is a cybernetic punk, and in part 2 he straight up alters time, making himself President Donald Trump. Dude, that's some straight up Lex Luthor shit. Look at the scene where he chases Marty through the tunnel. Good God, he becomes a straight up psychopathic killer. Even Norman Bates would be shitting his pants. It's funny how in part 3, the same villainy his ancestor Mad Dog Tannen does is more expectable since it's in the Old West and you could get away with more.
We'll finish this tomorrow.
Tomorrow we're robbing the Pine City stage.
What about Monday? We doing anything Monday?
No, Monday be fine. You can kill him on Monday.
I'll be back this way on Monday.
But the horrific things he does in the 50s, 80s, 2015, and even the frickin' ride is so over the top, you can't help but laugh at it. And honestly, we just love him for that. In fact, I think Marty perfectly described Biff with 3 simple words in part 3.
He's an asshole.
Biff. He may call you a butthead, but at least he doesn't drown you in manure. That's his job.
Manure! I hate manure!
Well, we're down to the top 5, everybody. We'll be back after this commercial break.
What's the matter? You chicken?
The fuck did you just say?
That's it, isn't it? Nothing but a little chicken.
You know what? Yes. Yes, chicken. I love Doc Brown's chicken. I still don't know why the hell they closed it. That was actually some damn good chicken. And I love the whole Art Deco and everything in that restaurant. I may like chicken, Biff, but you, sir, are a manure-eating cocksucker. Number 5. The music. Like most films, half of its success or failure can be attributed to its musical score. It's a tool to show the emotion and tone of the film. Well, it's safe to say that the music in Back to the Future not only succeeds, but is considered by many to be one of the greatest film scores of all time. And honestly, I kind of agree with that. With the film series primarily set in the 80s, they could have easily used a piano synthesizer-esque score from the movies. But apparently Steven Spielberg knew that a movie of this caliber needed an epic and exciting orchestral score. Since John Williams was unavailable or was too expensive, the score was written and composed by the legendary Alan Silvestri. And my god did he deliver! I dare you to find someone who doesn't know the Back to the Future theme. I mean, just listen to how it starts! When you hear that, you know shit's gonna get real. And when it finally explodes into your ears, it's one of the most exciting themes ever conceived. But it doesn't end there. How about the date theme that plays in the opening of parts 2 and 3? It really gets you in the mood of continuing the story. Then there's the massive amount of suspenseful music that plays throughout the action and climaxes. In some respects, it feels like a friggin' war is about to start. Actually, the score in Part 2 reminds me a lot more of the Predator soundtrack that Alan had previously made. Just listen to them back to back. Even for Part 3, Alan, in my opinion, gives us one of the most iconic Wild West movie themes. And finally, there's the great songs by Huey Lewis and the News, along with several other artists. I mean, who doesn't know the song Power of Love? No, not that one. There we go. It's probably one of the best songs of the 80s in general. There's also Back in Time, which is so catchy even Huey Toomore used it in his first few seasons of his show. Other tracks, including Earth Angel, Johnny Be Good, and Double Back, are also great songs that will suck you into the Back to the Future universe. And with all this put together, it creates one of the most iconic film soundtracks of all time. Number 4. The DeLorean. When it comes to iconic movie cars, what vehicles do you think of? The Batmobile, KITT, the Mark V, the Ecto-1, the Mystery Machine, the Blues Brothers Mobile? All of them are iconic to many fans around the world. But honestly, nothing beats the crowning achievement that is the DeLorean Time Machine. And honestly, when I think the word time machine, I instantly think of that car. Interesting enough, the original concept for the time machine was going to be an old refrigerator. But I think if that was the case, Doctor Who would just nuke the Jones out of that thing. So instead, they went with a DeLorean since the car itself was a major flop and was much cheaper. And boy, did they customize the shit out of it. Some of the fine features of the car include the flux capacitor,
This is what makes time travel possible.
the time circuits, and the destination keypad all have an iconic look even down to the sound effects. But when it came to flying forward to the future, Doc took the DeLorean time machine to new heights. One of the more positive changes was to switch the generator for the 1.21 gigawatts from plutonium to a Mr. Fusion, which allows garbage to fuel the car, which, let's be honest, would be a much better fuel source. But one of the coolest aspects of the car when it came to updates was the hover conversion, which turned the car into a frickin' Jetsons vehicle. And while Part 3 did downsize the aspects of the car, putting it on rails was also a cool little idea. In 2015, the original Hero DeLorean was taken apart piece by piece and restored to its original glory, being set in a Universal exhibit in Hollywood, California. But since then, the exhibit closed, and the DeLorean is on permanent indoor display at the Peterson Automotive Museum in its native home of Los Angeles, California. But overall, the DeLorean will always remain an iconic movie car. Just be mindful when you're trying to drive it through time not to get pulled over by the cops.
How fast do you think you were going?
88 miles per hour!
Number 3. The train scene from Back to the Future Part 3. One of my favorite aspects to the Back to the Future movies is the highly suspenseful climaxes from all 3 movies. And I'll definitely say that not only does Part 3 have an incredible suspenseful climax, but it has one of the most iconic train scenes in cinema history. I mean, wow guys. When I first watched this as a kid on VHS, it blew my fucking mind. Look at the stunt work, the moving sets, the special effects, the model work. The filmmakers knew that the third and final movie of the trilogy had to go out with a bang. Don't most finales do? And on top of that, holy fuck is it suspenseful. Every time I watch it, I'm at the edge of my seat. You really hope that all these characters make it out okay. And of course, it all leads to an epic final shot that even Michael Bay would jerk off to, with an explosive end of the Hill Valley train. Man, Sir Topham Hatt is gonna be pissed. The The model train was handled by Lucasfilm's Industrial Light and Magic, who also worked on all the visual effects for the trilogy. And man, was this model impressive. Built at a quarter scale, it did the job perfectly. An explosive end to an amazing trilogy. What more can you ask for? Number 2. 2015. It's funny to think that this whole setting in Back to the Future Part 2 is talked about more than ever. So I guess it's fitting that I'd give it the number 2 spot. Again, watching these movies as a kid and being fascinated by them, even in the 90s I always felt this was what the future was set to be. And when you think about it, guys, in 2017, we're technically now in the future. Nothing's really changed since I was a kid. I mean, yes, a lot has technically changed, but it's more on the nostalgic side in terms of nothing has changed. But in terms of what Back to the Future did predict, they did correct a few things. We have many automated machines, movies in 3D, the Cubs winning the World Series by 1 year, holograms, terrorist propaganda, powered laces, we're slowly on the move to flying cars, crappy CGI shark movies.
Shark still looks fake.
Democracy and court systems are slowly dying.
The justice system works swiftly in the future now that they've abolished all lawyers.
And of course, Biff Tannen as the President of the United States. But if I had wished for a few things the movie promised us, it would be the following. First off, no Mr. Fusion. I mean, yeah, scientists are slowly but surely working out a better fuel source to power out cars and technology, but I'm still waiting on my ability to take my garbage and recycle it into a power supply so we don't pollute our lands and oceans anymore. Second, obviously, no frickin' hoverboards. While hover technology is still in the works, I am kind of disappointed that the hoverboard has yet to be successfully created. Oh, that doesn't count! Don't need money, don't take the fame. Holy fucking shit, that's goddamn lame. It sucks and it's stupid, that ain't no hoverboard. It's a Segway, oh good lord. That's the power of dumb.
Those cars don't work on water unless you've got power!
But surprisingly, there's one thing that I find more upsetting that the future has not given us, and that is... Where the fuck is my hydrated pizza? I mean, seriously, why haven't scientists tried to work this shit out yet? It would probably be more environmentally friendly if these things could replace microwaves. But it would also save food buyers a lot more space. Come on, science, you can do better.
Break the cycle, Morty. Rise above. Focus on science.
But regardless, while 2015 has come and gone, the possibilities of the future still remain as optimistic as the film itself. And the number 1 best Back to the Future moment is... the Clocktower scene from Back to the Future. Out of all the scenes and moments from the entirety of the Back to the Future trilogy, nothing in the entire franchise is as iconic as the grand finale to the original film. It's epic, it's thrilling, it's emotional, it's suspenseful, and most of all, it sums up the entire series as a whole. Getting back to the future. And it's not just the sets, the characters, the score, and the iconic car, but all the movies are connected by one simple set, the Clocktower. From the beginning of part 1 where they try to save the Clocktower, to part 3 where they show its creation, everything is connected to this one piece.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Nope, sorry George, we're not doing that. And what is on the top of the tower? A clock, the symbol of time itself. In fact, the whole tower and the set of Hill Valley still stands today at Universal Studios Hollywood. So for any Back to the Future fan, be sure to check out the studio tour when you have the chance. But the ending itself to the original is what I actually first saw when I first laid eyes on this franchise. And I guess you could say, it was perfect timing. Oh, come on, guys! I couldn't resist!
Oh, that's awful.
But it's true. The whole scene is one of the best movie scenes in cinema history. And it was also really well planned. I love the little model set Doc builds in his lab.
this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it.
But the Clocktower scene probably has the best build-up and emotional scenes with the characters. In the movie, Doc is shot dead before Marty goes back to 1955. And when he meets 50s Doc, he sees this as a chance to not only get back to the future, but also to save Doc's life by warning him about future events. One Doc refuses to listen to. Doc has always been somewhat of a father figure to Marty, and the fact that Marty is more occupied in saving him, willing to let the fabric of the space-time continuum be destroyed, and his chances at getting back to his timeline, that's some really ballsy friendship, man. And it all leads to an electrifying finale. It's exciting filmmaking at its finest, which is why the Clocktower scene is the best Back to the Future moment of all time. And those were the top 10 timeless Back to the Future moments, and overall, looking at these movies again, it's amazing to think that they're still some of my all-time favorite films. As much as I miss the ride and talk about my favorite moments, there's still so much more I missed that makes these films stand the test of time after over 30 years. If you haven't seen the Back to the Future trilogy, you're missing out on something really special. It has everything a movie needs: an outstanding cast, a great director and producer, a wonderful story, great suspense and action, some good romance, hilarious comedy, incredible special effects, and one of the best soundtracks of all time. In other words, the perfect ingredients for a perfect movie and a perfect trilogy. Overall, the Back to the Future trilogy is not only one of Universal's finest pictures, but the trilogy as a whole is one of my favorite films of all time, in the past, present, and future. And for the fuck of it, I'm gonna give the entire trilogy a 10 out of 10. For the better lack of a word, these films will always be timeless. But now I want to hear from you. What are your favorite Back to the Future moments? Let me know in the comment section below. So until the next video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. This is BigJackFilms, signing...
Jack! Jack, you gotta come back with me.
Where?
Back to the future.
Wait, Brad, what are you talking about? What happens to me in the future? Why the hell do you have a DeLorean?
And why didn't you invite me to co-host? Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies. You didn't think I was going to get involved in this?
Point taken.
Okay, now's not the time, Jack. This letter will explain things. I gotta go fill up my baby with Pepsi.
You power your DeLorean with Pepsi?
It's a better fuel source than plutonium.
Dear Jack, if my calculations are correct, you will receive this letter immediately after the DeLorean pulled in the driveway. First, let me assure you that I'm alive and well. I've been living happily in the past few months in the year 1885. The lightning bolt at... 1885! September 1885! He's alive! The dog's alive! I mean, he's in the Old West, but he's alive! No, wait. We're not actually continuing this. This was a one-shot deal. This was just for laughs. Wait, you're actually taking this seriously? For God's sakes, Internet, take a frickin' joke. Seriously, just cut the cameras.
Never to come in here.
You'll do well to respect your employer, my young friend.
And where's my reports?
You did well in testing the warrior's newfound range.
Keep close to this
damage, you son of a bitch.
I could have been killed.
What's gonna cost us? How much money you got on you?
Enough to keep you in power for as long as I reign. Make no mistake, Mr. Tannen. Your services is very much respected here in the power of darkness. And once the warrior becomes the monster, it will be our time to rise.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. Click and subscribe, and also go to timemachineforhorror.com to get your chance to be in a DeLorean. Now I'm off to go back to the future. Bye!